gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Greetings, and I say season's greetings, compliments of the season to everyone. This is your host, Queen Mother Dr. Chen of Oz Speaks, where we really highlight building a new legacy. And for some persons throughout the year, we've had an opportunity here with the Crew podcast to really highlight so many different ideas, so many different resolutions, so many discussions, conversations, and sometimes it may appear like a lecture because educators are educators, and sometimes we really get off into very engaging content. And tonight, we really would like to simmer as we get to the close of the year 2025 and encourage persons to take a very deep breath, hold that breath with sacred intention, and release. It has been a powerful year. For some, they may use the term interesting. For some, they may say it was provocative. For some, they will say it's so challenging. And yes, there have been gains, a lot of prosperity for many, and there's also been significant losses. Losses in body, mind, soul, spirit, and consciousness. One of the things that we spend a significant amount of time sharing here on Oz Speaks, and you'll hear us say Oz Speaks, building legacy, Oz Speaks, building a new legacy, Oz Speaks. The essence is around how we embrace our ancestral, ancient, sacred traditions in contemporary times. How do we as women begin to have these conversations, life centered conversations that offer solution and resolution to how we strengthen ourselves in body, mind, soul, spirit, and consciousness. And being clear that we are not perfect. We're moving, hopefully, the intention in the direction of perfection. However, we are not perfect. And it's really important that when we speak of building new legacies, and I say legacies plural, we're speaking of it, at least in this podcast, in these broadcast engagements. Usually I have a guest. Sometimes, if I don't have a guest, I'm usually referencing which will happen tonight just because of the season. There are so many pieces of activities happening during this time. People are preparing for a variety of light centered, seasonal change centered, end of the year centered, beginning of a new year centered activities. And I'd want to highlight that when we speak of building new legacy and just building legacy through a lens of our ancient, ancestral, sacred traditions, us speaks. We're also speaking of it through a lens of an interdisciplinary form of engagement, an interdisciplinary transcultural media exchange where we have conversations, life centered discussions, conversations, reasonings, gatherings. We also speak about the actionable deliverables that people are involved in. What are you doing in 2026? When you speak of having a resolution, which is very customary during this time of year, what does that manifest and really look like? How are you going to be able to measure and offer an accountability tool to your resolutions that you speak of at the end of 2025 when the end of 2026 comes forward? Granted that your life remains in place during that time because we wish for the best. The other part of talking around us speaks building legacy. Throughout this year of 2025, we've covered information and ideas that happen in the Caribbean, in the 48 contiguous US, throughout the Americas, from literally the North Pole to the South Pole, and everything between. We've referenced activities in Europe, of course, in Africa. We've gone to Oceania and other parts of the world to show a linkage, the rippling effect, the connectivity of human engagement, whether we've spoken of it through human rights or the violations thereof, whether we've talked about health and wellness and care and compassion, or the imbalance and the lack thereof, whether we've talked about peace and all types of peace building efforts that are happening around the world, or not, when there's been forms of terrorism and genocide and warfare that are unparalleled in human history. We've had a chance to raise some of these conversations and to listen to how many of our sisters and brothers have offered ways of learning, ways of thriving, not only surviving, but thriving through many of these global affairs. We've looked at it from a microscopic level of some of our individual losses and gains, what has happened in our families, both biological, extended, and spiritual, because they are slightly different. We've looked at our communities, whether we are in the Western Hemisphere, the Eastern Hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere, or the Southern Hemisphere. And we've also looked at things through a lens of things that are regional to compare them. And we've also taken some time to just breathe and be settled and explore ways that we can show respect for one another in the midst of living in an environment that is changing every squinette, smaller than a second of the day. With that being said, that's why tonight my deepest intention as the host of Speaks, Building New Legacy, and then highlighting the vibration around knowledge and power and prosperity and truth, justice, order, reciprocity, divine righteousness, balance, and harmony through a lens of those several principles are an integral part of the ancestral feminine principle of Ma'at. I encourage persons to, as they're progressing through this shift in the Gregorian calendar, because remember, we're speaking of the Gregorian calendar coming to an end on December 31st and opening up the new Gregorian year of 2026 on January 1st. Because in Ethiopia, it's a different year. According to the Dendera, there's a different year. And many others. There's a Mayan calendar. There's the Japanese, there's so many different calendars. So we're speaking through a lens of that. And I'd like to use this time to highlight a couple of points that are linked to the winter solstice. And some persons are like, well, what are you going to jump from what the show is to the winter solstice? Since this is a time of festivities and a time where everyone has their free will to accept, acknowledge, recognize, respect, practice that which provides divine righteousness, harmony, and balance for them. There was a time where persons were very, very rigid, very strict in regards to, if you celebrate Halloween, you must be into devil worship. Eh, If you celebrate Hanukkah, then you're overlooking the rights of persons that are not part of the Judaist, I'm not speaking of Zionism, but the Judaist tradition. And I think this is a great time during these winter months. Again, we speak of the winter season around this time of the year, knowing that December 21st, customarily around that particular day, is the longest night of the year. Not my words, it's a astronomical, planetary, seasonal reality that impacts the entire planet, and even with the Earth tilted. And so, this winter solstice time is also a time where people speak of the rising of the light, or the ascension of the light, or the awakening of light, right? And in some traditions, people misrepresent people that actually have ceremonies and acknowledge light, acknowledge the rising of the sun. And it ends up becoming something really woojie woojie in regards to sun worshippers. And I like for persons to just look at the simplicity of how the divine creator has prepared us and guided us and sheltered us in understanding a natural occurrence of the longest night of the year and the beginning of a season where more light comes earlier and earlier each day. I think that it's really instrumental for us to respect, recognize, and at least just acknowledge that. And for those that would like to know more information, I really encourage you to look at some of the very engaging information around what is the winter solstice, not the heebie jeebie side. You know, just look at the essence of where some of the words of light, words of positive practice are acknowledged. So I'll share a particular piece from a colleague scholar who has spent some time looking at this season during this time of the month of December in this Gregorian calendar. And for some, the significance is always linked to, quote, the first day to lengthening most obviously after December 21st, typically the shortest day of the year, is the day of the winter solstice. Please understand that the ancient Kemites have always believed in one supreme God, or rather expression of divine life force, as stated in the book of the coming forth from darkness into light, Pertem Huru. And that was written and revised, excuse me, six, excuse me, 6,000 years ago. I'll continue the quotation. Nevertheless, the spirit of life from the Creator exists in all things, and therefore we honor this manifestation of the Creator's life force, Ra, in the sun. At the midnight hour on the very first minute of the 25th of December, the birth of the sun is commemorated. Beginning on the 21st, the period of sunlight in each day increases. Thus, the sun appears to have been born again from the short periods of daylight in the preceding months. At this time, the sun was in the zodiacal sign Capricorn, which was known as the stable. So the infant sun was said to have been born in a stable. Shining brightly on the meridian was Sirius, the star from the east, while rising in the east was Virgo, the Virgin. The line of the horizon passing through her center to the right of Sirius was Orion, with three stars in his belt. These stars lie in a line and point towards Sirius, and in ancient times they were known as three kings. Unquote. Now, this is coming from a post that have been shared amongst several of us that have been studying this astronomical reality, what takes place in the month of December. Again, respecting the seasonal transformation around winter solstice. But this is based on teachings that were published, and you can easily find them in the Osara Set community, and specifically through the work of the founding elder, Ra Nefer Amen. Some may remember him as Ra Nefer Amen. Some may remember him as Ra Strong. And we can go on and on. But if you'd like to learn more, I encourage persons to just look for the Asar Aset, AUSAR, AUSET Society. And there's a very wide variety of literature that you would be able to locate, find, and engage in because people speak of this through a various set of lenses. There are so many that have studied this to really get a better form of clarity on why is this literally globally acknowledges a time of balance, a time of divine righteousness, a time of what is it? Joy to the world. The Lord has come. Let's be real honest on what this means in different vernaculars, in different spaces, in different societies, amongst different cultures. And it should be a time of joy, but it's also a time of loss. It's also a time of setting things to rest. It's also a time where we see the old year come down and go out with the old man with the staff bending over, and we see the baby coming into the new light in the new year, in this season, in this time. So there's a lot that comes with that. So there's been a number, I mean, I have actually done some different publications around this theme, and I made sure to pull from a wider variety of what I refer to as like eclectic knowledge systems that allow for persons to bring in their different observations during this time of the year. There's 8 billion humans on Earth and counting. And as much as we may think that there is a singular way of observing, recognizing, acknowledging, and respecting the Son of the Creator, it is not limited to one particular practice. And again, just my perspective. This is just, no one has to acknowledge and accept what I'm saying in fullness. That's why I'm always encouraging persons to do your own form of study and to remember to the best of your ability some of the things that are going to be shared. Sometimes when persons think of this season, it's also a time in some vernaculars amongst the Kemites, ancient Nile Valley civilization. There is a connection to Khnum. Khnum is the deified one that's on the potter's wheel, the potter, the one that does forming, the one that molds and works with the creator in terms of creation. And there's a lot that comes with that. So I may read some of that a little later, but I really like to get back to the point at hand so that persons are comfortable when we talk about the winter solstice. And just notice that this is a time everybody gets into cleaning. Everybody wants the new year to come in with their house clean, and they want things to have light. And they make sure that persons can see light outside their house. I mean, some people really go all out. So their decorations, it looks like whether it's Christmas in totality, they've got the reindeer. It could be in the tropics. They're putting in fake snow. They've got it going on. They've got the sleigh. They've got the whole nativity scene. And then they've got snowmen. So when you know what it's like to see a snowman on someone's porch in the middle of the Caribbean tropics? That, right. So we still have children and not so young children that leave out food offerings for the Santa that will come and bring gifts. And it's a set of rituals. People have trees with beautiful circular, look like planets, ornaments with light and a beautiful star. Beautiful, nor store bright star at the top of their tree. And so I'm saying these things because sometimes you do Christmas, I do Kwanzaa, you do Hanukkah, I do Diwali. We get into Diwali. We get into a lot of how do you express your recognition, support, love, and honor of the Almighty during this time of the year. And all we're encouraging is that it be done so it authentically provides joy, peace, love, and prosperity. Doing that is great. If you have a lot of gifts, even if the boxes are just pretty, very beautified and wrapped nice, and there's nothing in them, but if it's like a showpiece, if you want to go all out and spend until you spend, everyone has their way that they do this. For some people, it's what do they make? What do they bake? What do they share? What do they teach? What do they utter? Some people it's just being present and showing love and mercy and that really wonderful G word, grace and gratitude. For some, it's setting up an altar. For some, it is being at Mass or having being part of a religious service. For some, it's singing with the choir, even if you're not a singer, but at least humming and doing your best to stay on key and acknowledging those choral gatherings. For some, it might be going from house to house. I know brothers and sisters that are Buddhists that still remember all the Christmas carols. And during this season, even though they're Buddhists, practicing Buddhists, they still travel with their families to do these choral songs and caroling from house to house because it brings them joy and it brings peace literally to the world. So when I'm talking about these things, as I'm coming from a lens of whether it's the winter solstice, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Kwanzaa, and we'll speak about Kwanzaa in a moment, because I don't wish for anyone to feel like that's being ignored or deleted in the conversation. But I'd like to highlight that we're looking at things that are also gracefully respecting that which has existed for millennia, not just man made obligatory types of religiosity and practices, and definitely not things that are designed to replace something else, but things that are organically connected to, how do you clear space during this time? How do we show respect to the Almighty? How do we honor this season? And how do we bring that type of joy and honor in a very beautiful, uplifting, loving, powerfully welcoming way? Right? There was a time where I can remember, because while we speak of the winter solstice in December, in September, we're dealing with the autumnal equinox on or about the 22nd of September. In the summer, we have a summer solstice on or about the 21st of June. And notice this is when the seasons change in accordance, particularly for those living in the northern hemisphere, they have distinct seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, right? And in the spring, the equinox, equal days, equal nights, is on or about the 22nd of March. And this particular season gives us an opportunity to not only celebrate moving out of the quote cosmic darkness of the year and moving into the cosmic light, with the new year and new beginnings and the opening of light. It also allows us to recognize the significance in terms of ceremonies that are done around this time and the solemnity, the balance that comes with that. For some people it's going to be joyous music, singing, etc. For others it may be complete silence. For some it may be a time of fasting and meditation. Many people will fast, well, they need to after observing certain holidays in November, like Thanksgiving, where there's a lot of feasting. And then again, forgetting that this is supposed to be or had originally been a time of celebrating the harvest and honoring those first fruits, right? And it has shifted in terms of a more commercialized piece. And what I love is that people are still, regardless of what the intentions were, how these holidays started, if we look at some of the work, and I encourage people to look at publications like African People and European Holidays, volumes 1 and 2, by Reverend Dr. Barashango, Barashango, not for the light heart, but just to get perspective on how people look at African people's observances that have become part of the traditional practice but they're grounded in very European holidays that not always were designed in the best interest of people of African ancestry, right? And it's important to see that. Some persons don't celebrate anything during this time of the year because they have practices that do not acknowledge man made holidays. They don't celebrate birthdays, Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, any of it. However, they still give recognition and honor to the illuminated Christed one. I just need all of this to simmer for a second because this broadcast tonight is really about opening space and for us to expand to a place of wellness, upliftment, and understanding. Again, I'm going to say it like I started. We are not perfect. We're moving in a vibration of perfection. And I say this from a space of honoring those elders still amongst us that still grace us with their presence and give us honor and recognition and wisdom and direct guidance, whether we like it or not. And I give thanks and praise to the young people, the younger generation that have the drive, the passion, and wisdom and understanding. That even though they know that some of the things that they inherited are really not the best, outright messed up, jacked up, that they still have a semblance of respect and honor for those that are their physical chronological elders, as well as those that are elders in spirit, and that reciprocity between these intergenerational dimensions and spaces prayerfully will be improved as we move forward with deeper awareness and understanding. I always highlight a couple of things around this time because when we talk about these sessions and processionals, I want to highlight this small portion, and this is coming from some of the work. And again, some of this is research that many of us have done together for some years. Some of this is coming. I also encourage persons to look for MAAXERU, Makeru Tep, TEP, another powerful scholar, initiate, practitioner of ancient ancestral sacred traditions, and a published author who has spent a significant amount of time looking at these astronomical pieces of engagement in dimensions and practices, and then sharing through a lens of ceremonial ma'at, truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony, so that we can at least speak to some of these conversations in a more open and clearly understanding, just so that we know that many of the things that we practice, many of the things that we think are just literal, they're very symbolic. And when we speak of astronomy, we're not talking about the man induced or man interpreted astrology. That's very different. There's a science to both astrology and astronomy, but we're speaking specifically through a lens of those astronomical planetary occurrences that are in alignment with the Most High, are in alignment with the Almighty Creator, with minimal interference, even though many times humans continue to interfere with that which is nature. But I want to highlight this piece as I was talking about the stars of the East, the three kings, the connection to the baby Haru, Jesus, the illuminated Christed one, the Virgin linked to the Virgo in the astronomy, just so people understand that we're speaking of a heliacal space, we're speaking of angelic space, we're speaking of not just heavenly bodies, but star systems. And some people may get a little bit deep, but for the purposes of tonight, all I ask is for openness and understanding and love and joy and peace, more harmony. to the best of our ability. But I want to highlight a piece around the science that is shared by Ma Kerutep, and many of these teachings also are part of a recently ascended ancestor, Baba Haru Ankra Samad Sepata. May he continue to rise in power among venerated ancestors, clear and free of any interference from the earth. And he being the chief high priest of Smaitawi, Ankh Ascension Renaissance, and the Shrine of Ptah, coming out of the womb of a woman out of this region of the Caribbean, grounded, born, yes, in República Dominicana, but raised in the British Virgin Islands and then socialized and retired and laid to rest in the 48 contiguous US, but impacting the globe. And again, look up Smai Tawi, Smaitawi, and just look for Baba Haru, Baavaheru. And if you want to go to his more contemporary engagements, and again, to learn the science, you look at the craftsmanship, the science, the creative arts, and the economic drivers that people were involved in. You can look up the Shrine of Ptah, and you can look for the Studio of Ptah in New York to see the legacy of his work for decades. That people wear and are adorned. People, wedding rings, wedding bands, protective garments. You need to see this to understand why would she talk about this at this season, at this time, as we're moving from one part of the Gregorian calendar coming to a close and opening up for the year 2026. Just think about that. Take a deep breath. That one. So we're going to do a moment with some mathematical computations just to give it some credence for the techies out here, yeah? The other rotation of the sun is called precession, or precession of the equinoxes. The precession route of the sun moves counterclockwise back through the entire celestial sphere, which includes the 12 zodiacal constellations or ages. The precession is caused by the slow, wobbly rotation of the Earth on its own axis. The Earth wobbles or proceeds at a 23.5 degree tilt. It is this 23.5 degree tilt that creates the four seasons of the Earth. The Earth's full 360-degree rotation on its own axis takes about 25,920 years. I'm going to say that part again. The Earth's full 360-degree rotation on its own axis takes about 25,920 years. The Earth moves 1 degree every 72 years. People refer to that as conspirators of Suket or Set. And 30 degrees every 2,160 years. You need to remember those numbers: 25,920, 1 degree, 72 years, 30 degrees, you can do the math, 2,160. The 30 degrees stands out because the sun, as Haru, the Christed illuminated one, stays in each of the 12 zodiacal ages for 30 degrees or 2,160 years before it moves to the next age. That is why the numbers 30 and 12 are so important to Western religious theology. It is said that the mythological Jesus as son had 12 followers, and at the age of 30, he was baptized by John the Baptist and then went out to preach the gospel. So, again, you see something that's very theological that is really linked to something that is astronomical. That's why it's important to know that science, not to negate either portion, because perspective and how 8 billion people see this will never be the same. It would be lovely if it were, but it won't be, not in this particular iteration. So I bring this back to what is shared here in terms of looking at the creation concepts through a Kemetic Nile Valley. And when I say Kemet, we're speaking of the northern portion of the Nile, recognizing that Kemet is the granddaughter, or probably the great granddaughter, because you need to also look at Nubia. You need to look at Kush. You need to look at the Ainu. You need to go to the original, right? And that's why so many people can go to Kemet, go into the United Arab Republic with some resistance, going to Sudan, but follow those beautiful edifices that gives so much history and knowledge to humanity, not just to people in that region living there now, but to all of humanity that have traversed through these spaces and then dispersed in the earth and have established so many aspects of the illumination of the Christed One and light and joy and peace to the world. And I know this is a lot for some people, but this is what Spirit brought out for today. And I think that it's important that we honor how we speak about this season, because for some people, this is the only time they get with their families. This is the only time that they fast. This is the only time that they go into a space of reflection and love and joy. And we want to honor and respect that. And I think that that's really critical that we do that. And yes, we were having a power moment. So you'll hear me tuning and moving, right? But I want to highlight a few more things before we leave tonight. And I want to thank the Crew Podcast for just giving persons like me a platform where we can actually talk about these types of things and share this. And if it provides some degree of strength, or if it raises more questions, share the questions. Send the emails to astspeaks, ASTSPEAKS at Gmail, or you can place certain things right into our respective chats. With the Crew Podcast, we will be returning. We have some special broadcasts. Please continue to tune in and listen. With the Crew Podcast, there'll be more podcasts from our very powerful hosts throughout the next week and change. And then there'll be a moment of reflection in January while everyone is pulling things back together. We'll be featuring starting fresh and new in February. And we look forward to you supporting. And when I say support, support, invest, and promote. So if you see hashtag SIP 365, that's what I'm speaking about. Can't speak for what they mean elsewhere. But when you see that in any of Queen Mother Dr. Chinzera's platforms, SIP 365 or just hashtag SIP, I'm speaking of support, invest, promote. One of the things we're very good at is listening to people sometimes, or I should say, exercising hearing. Because if we were listening, we would not have to be reminded to provide resourceful support, resourceful investments, and resourceful promotion of things that you benefit from, things that help you think, things that help improve and increase your journey, your trod into perfection. And that's what I will share with that part for now. One of the other things that's really beautiful around the this time of the year, and for those persons that may not always remember, is this is also a time where people speak of not just the Christmas holiday and the birth, the reflection of time honoring the birth of Christed One. And we're not going to do a historiography on if this is actually the day he was born. Is it connected to the birth of a different one of light or not? We're going to focus on a large population of the 8 billion humans on Earth. Stop everything leading into December 25th. And if we can just let that move in the direction of joy, peace, love, no war, I'm going to say that: joy, peace, love, no war. Wouldn't it be amazing if there were no war activities, deaths, homicides, murder, rape, or pillaging during this season? Now that would be joy to the world. The Lord has come. That would be fabulous. And it would be epic. And I'm sure there had to be a time in history, maybe not in our generational period, obviously not, but at some point that there was authentic peace, authentic balance, authentic light, and abundant agape love. Just think about that and what that would feel like. I think I like that more than usual. And with that being shared, I think the other part that we were going to cover tonight, because we're going to close shortly within our hour, I this is a great time to look at what people have brought together around Kwanzaa. Many people will say that it's a man-made holiday. How does it relate to the season? Some persons have gone as far as to limit their awareness and see Kwanzaa through the lens of just one creator or one entity that is responsible for that. And I always acknowledge those that have contributed to the Kwanzaa observances. And for those in the room that may not be as familiar, Kwanzaa is a celebration of the first fruits, of the first fruits in the harvest. It is grounded in the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa that are for day one, and it's honored from the December 26th through January 1st, with day one, December 26th, being the principle of Umoja, which is in Swahili unity. Day two, the 27th of December, is Kujijagulia, self determination. Day three is the principle, the 28th of December, is the principle of Ujima, collective work and responsibility. The 29th, day four, is the principle of Ujama, cooperative economics, a favorite to many. Day five, December 30th, Nia, purpose. Day six, December 31st, Kuumba, creativity. Day seven, the last day of Kwanzaa observances, January 1st, Imani, faith. So again, you're going from unity to self-determination to work, collective work and responsibility, to cooperative economics, to purpose, to creativity, to faith in 7 days after this same season of moving from the winter solstice, acknowledging light in the awakening, persons in many of the parts of the world honoring Christmas, the birth of the Son of the Almighty, the illuminated one, right? There are masses, services around the planet. Some persons use it as a time for family, community, and humanity. However, you're acknowledging, we encourage persons to really look at these things through that lens, because Kwanzaa is a celebration of, as I said, the first fruits. It has its ancestral roots throughout the African world, in the continent, in the diaspora. And most persons will hear about the first fruits of these terms in spaces like Tanzania, Mozambique, Uganda, and Kenya, and Zimbabwe. And it's grounded in a Pan African or global African principle of the first fruits and honoring family, community, and humanity, right? So it's important. And I use this particular piece. I encourage persons, if you don't know anything about Kwanzaa and you are a celebrant during the season of various holidays, there is a wonderful film that was done, yeah, it's been over a decade, by M.K. Asante II. It is called The Black Candle. Again, you can go on YouTube and find that particular film, but it's good to have your own clean copy to share so persons can know a little bit. Plus, some of the narration that's offered by Dr. Maya Angelou is pretty lovely, right? But I think it's important to know that, and I quote, this is from Dr. Mpundishi Hassan Kesalim Jehudimus of Black Gold Press. He has a publication called Spiritual Warriors or Healers. And it's important for persons among the Matabele in Kwazulu, among the Thonga, Luma, among the Love, Fegula, among the Ashanti, Afahye, or Oduiro, among the Yoruba, Eje, Orologin, or Orun Ijesu. And again, ending quote, this is coming from Dr. Mfundishi's work, Spiritual Warriors or Healers, another publication you can look for to learn at least the 5 values and practices central to African first fruit celebrations honored around this time, usually from the autumn season all the way into the opening of winter, right? And those practices that form the development of Kwanzaa as it's acknowledged in specifically in the 48 contiguous, but now in the world, or in many significant parts of the world where African consciousness and celebratory ceremonies are honored. And that is these 5 values and principles of the African first fruits: harvesting, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. I'm going to say those again: harvesting, reverence, commemoration, recommitment, and celebration. I encourage persons to, look at some of those things. I will definitely be posting some older links in our other platforms because it's important for persons to just be comfortable to have these types of conversations. I know I've covered a lot of different areas tonight, and it wasn't as if it was conversational, but I'm really having a conversation with each and every one that's tuned in, listening, taking a moment, whether you are desirous to hear or not. And I'm really giving thanks for having the opportunity to share little snippets of word sound power that provide grace and joy and peace and mercy. I am always grateful when I see that our families are willing to gather and use this as a time of joy, use this as a time of peace, and use this as a time of harmony. And like I always tell persons in general, may you be blessed abundantly with joy, prosperity, what we say, Anku Jasanet, abundant life, strength, health, wellness, prosperity for eternity. And for any of the errors, any of the missteps that I or others in our tribe have done. We ask for recognition and understanding. And how do we say we forgive those that trespass against us? As we forgive, yes, that one. That people say that we don't always live by and do. So we definitely honor that during this time of joy, peace, prosperity, and abundant agape love. May your families be blessed in abundance. And I say our families, may me correct myself, may our families be blessed in abundance. There are so many wonderful activities happening. There's Kwanzaa celebrations literally happening all around the world. People are using this time to honor, whether it's Christmas, Festival of Lights. Some people are honoring various fasting and ceremonies that we don't even always have the proper names for. And I really encourage our sisters and brothers in earshot to authentically and lovingly, most lovingly, speak truth as power and give thanks for all of the grace that we've been given this time, and for all of us that have had ancestral transitions impacting our families. Like, may we keep our heart as light as a feather. This has been a challenging time for many of our families. I know just recently, well, in recent months, losing our matriarch to our family and then losing the matriarch that survived her in less than a month after that has been very challenging. So we sent a lot of light to Doña Eulalie and Doña Eunice, my mother and my aunt, and we send that love and mercy to all those that have had similar passings. I send a special shout out and prayerful love of strength and heart lightening strength to my sisters, Dr. Chipo, on the transition of her beloved mother, Queen Mother Lucy. And I send the same to Queen Mother Yvonne as she made her ancestral transition recently, the mother of one of our beloved daughters and sister queens, Blackness. And I say these things so that you add the names. So with whatever you celebrate during this time, bring joy and peace to the world so that we can get ready. 2026 promises to be a very engaging time. And we have a choice. Either we're going to be moving abundantly, drawing prosperity, love, peace, and greatness beyond measure. It'll be more of the same. Which will you choose? Again, who? Joy, prosperity, peace. Remember, when we speak of our speaks, we're speaking of ancient ancestral sacred traditions being brought into power. Love again. Have a blessed season. Make sure you join us on the 31st. You're going to get to see all of the hosts from the Crew Podcast. 31st. I know everybody's going to be doing their New Year's Eve piece, but shift of it just a little, and join us for a moment and so we can share and we can toast to greatness, to power, to glory, to the Almighty. Give thanks. And again, culture heals humanity. Land is our foundation. Spiritual harmony unifies us. Give thanks and protect your house of life. And protect Ost speaks. Support, invest, promote. Give thanks. Good night.